Hello and welcome back to the SpiderNerd.com podcast. Once again, I'm your host, Jonathan Weber, aka SpiderNerd, the webmaster of the site. And joining me once again today for the panel is Mr. Thomas Patterson.
Hello, everybody.
All right, so we won't do introductions today because we literally did that on the other podcast. We hope everyone had a Merry Christmas. We would talk about what we got for Christmas, but we're recording this.
It hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, it hasn't happened yet. We're recording this on December 23rd. We did feel the need to split the show up into two shows because we have 3 issues to review and we had those news topics. So I didn't want to do that all in one show because personally I don't like 2-hour podcasts. I think they're tedious. So I decided to split it up into 2 shows. So hopefully you guys don't have a problem with that. But if you do, send all complaint mail to Dan Slott because he put out too many issues in a month. Just kidding. Don't do that. But so we're gonna start today. We are covering Superior 22, 23, and 24. This is the first 3 parts of the 4-part Darkest Hours arc of Superior Spider-Man, and so we shall start with issue number 22, written by Dan Slott and Christos Gage. Art by Humberto Ramos, and the cover price is $3.99 because Marvel loves ripping us off. Alright, so basic premise of the story. Flash, aka Agent Venom, is in town to take down the Crime Master. Parker Industries is open after literally 3 issues since he came up with the idea. Aunt May is going to undergo an operation to walk again. Peter Puss is making some really weird facial expressions thanks to Humberto Ramos. Captain Watanabe realizes that Carly is missing and searches her apartment. Peter Puss and Anne Maria have some sexy time. Yeah, we'll talk about that. Spock goes after Agent Venom, and basically they fight. Crime Master surrenders. Spock and Venom fight. Flash tries to tell Spock that he's really Flash Thompson, his biggest supporter. And I shall read the quote from Spock on the very last page. "Sorry, Flash, you must have me confused with someone who cares." Which was actually a pretty badass line, I have to say. It was actually pretty badass. But, yeah, that's basically this issue. If you couldn't tell from the recap, not much happened. So, Thomas, we'll start with you. Initial grade on this issue.
C+.
Okay, that's good, because I was honestly afraid that you were going to give this an A. Because, what's my grade on it? My grade, C-. So, and let me just explain my little grading system here real quick. For me, at least, A's, anything A, anything B, and C+, that's generally a positive review for me. Solid C, not C+, not C-, solid C is right down the middle. That's neutral territory. C- and anything below that is a negative review. So I just gave this issue a fairly negative review. It's the highest negative review I can give it, but I gave it a negative review. So, we'll start by going through the issue. I want to talk about this opening scene right here at the beginning of the book. Now, I've heard people say that this was actually a necessary scene. I will go to my grave saying that this scene did not need to be here.
Completely in agreement with you.
Because
I think the whole story could have worked out without it.
Because, honestly, nothing happens in this scene. Nothing happens.
And I feel like this issue was just full of filler stuff that could have been ripped out except for maybe some of the stuff that could have been gone over, recapped in the next issue that could have been gone like that. And then the last scene would probably need to be fully explained in the next issue, but have the next issue be slightly longer and we would have gotten the exact same thing.
Yeah, but then we also would have had to pay $1 more for it. But also we wouldn't have been paying $3.99 for this issue. But so
It would be so it's $8 compared to 5.
yeah, Yeah, okay, I'll do that. We can do that. Yeah, this is why I passed college algebra, everybody. Yeah, this scene right at the beginning of the book, I have to tell you, when I read this issue, and even when I reread it to prepare for this podcast, it's boring.
Yeah.
It's just, Flash is talking to Betty about, their relationship. I mean, they start off talking about the Crime Master. Okay, that's okay. Really, you could have established why Flash was in New York with a simple one-line narration box.
Yep.
It's like, you literally could have done that, and I mean, it would have been a bit half-assed.
What about a thought box from Flash Thompson? So I'm here to take this guy out, and where the heck is he? And then, have him show up. Ah, there he is. Kind of like usual Spider-Man start kind of thing.
Honestly, I would have been more okay with that than what we got in this scene. Because this scene was just boring. I mean,
it was. Yep.
I just remember, I honestly considered when I was first reading this issue just skipping over this entirely, and I honestly felt that it was bad. And they brought up the relationship between Flash and Betty at the worst possible time. It's like when you're about to go fighting, a bunch of guys, and you tell your ex-girlfriend to get them away, you don't say, "Oh yeah, by the way, I want to get back together with you."
Yeah.
It's like, you just don't do that.
Not even Peter would be blatant enough to do something like that.
And while we're on the topic of the opening scene, we don't get a huge glimpse of it, but we do see a bit of Flash's design outside of being Agent Venom. And I have to say, I'm not a big fan. Really not.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll say this right now, and watch as Thomas completely relates to this point. I'm not a big fan of long hair on dudes.
No, I'm not either. It's I just have a problem, especially with bad art, Humberto Ramos, understanding whether or not it's a guy or a girl some of the time, and I'm not a fan of it because it confuses me sometimes, and then it also takes me out of the narration on why they have their hair so long, and I just keep questioning it all the time, and it just irritates me. I just can't handle it. It's bad for me.
I mean, no offense to any guy out there who has long hair. I mean, I do actually know some guys who have long hair, and they actually, I'd say they look decent with it because that's the only way I've ever seen them. So, one of my friends actually has long hair, but, whatever. But I just don't like it on Flash. It just doesn't look good to me. And it's just...
Well, I think Humberto Ramos, who kind of half-asses everything and doesn't look all that good with anything he draws, it's just, you don't need it to be there, especially when he has difficulty doing anything that looks good at all.
Yeah. I will say, I will give him props for how he drew Agent Venom. I did like that. I felt that What?
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I personally think that Agent Venom does look fairly solid in this issue. But overall, after this scene, did we think the issue could get any worse? I mean, I'm just going to say it right now. This whole Parker Industries thing, literally, it took me out of the issue when I first read it, and let me tell you why. I come from a family who owns their own business. My dad owns his own business. It took him 2 years to get the thing from when he got the idea. It took him a good year to get the building permit. And then it took him a good year to build out the building, hire staff, get the equipment and everything. And that's just for a restaurant. Can you imagine how long it would take to set up a scientific research agency? Peter,
a lot longer, but this is Spock. It needs to work within the boundaries of the story, dude. As everyone needs to act stupid so that the plot can keep going. Come on.
Don't care. It's like, this was just, he literally got this idea at the end of issue 19, and here we are in issue 22. He's got a full staff and a building and everything. All the equipment he needs, everything. And it's just like, no. I'm sorry, but no. It just, that pissed me off. That really pissed me off. And then, though I did like the line from Sajani, when they find out that Aunt May and Jay Jameson are inside the building, she says, "Ha, the big tough boss man is a mama's boy." I did like that line quite a bit. That was pretty good.
That's true. That was pretty funny.
But this whole thing of Parker Industries being up and running this early is just unrealistic. And I get it. We're talking about a guy, we're talking about a book with a guy who can stick to walls and sling webs. I get that. But it's like this really got to me. And
these stories are supposed to be able to ground the extraordinary into our ordinary lives, where everything else is the same except we're living in a world with superheroes in it. And so I can completely understand the whole idea that something outside of the superheroic world is not up to what it is. Although, to be fair, not a whole lot of people understand the process that it goes into to creating a business. So I feel like a lot of people kind of shortchange that, just kind of go like, it's really easy, especially for someone as smart as Peter to make one. And that's how it works. And people just, kind of go like, okay, that makes sense. But for people who have real world experience, they're going to have problems with it. And I completely understand that.
Yeah, it's just, this probably would not have affected me if it wasn't for my family background. But honestly, this just really got to me. I was just like, you got to be kidding me with this. And then, of course, we have Humberto Ramos' art, which, once again, just gives Peter Puss these weird facial expressions.
Yep.
It's just, what the hell?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. And then, of course, we get the dialogue, and all this shit, and it's just really not good. It really isn't.
Yeah.
And then moving off of that into a scene that I actually did like quite a bit, which was the Captain Watanabe searching Carly Cooper's apartment. I'm really glad that they're actually touching on this plot because I honestly didn't think Slott was going to do anything about it.
Yeah, me neither. I didn't think anyone would really notice it because didn't she got abducted by the Goblin King or whatever, right? Last issue?
She got abducted by some goblin, yeah.
Yeah. And so I'm glad that they're following up on it. And I'm also kind of glad that Watanabe is kind of like suspecting that it's Spider-Man because of everything that happened. Obviously it's not Spider-Man, although there are people who believe that the Goblin King is actually Peter.
Yeah, those I don't even want to comment on that.
I really, 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 really hope it's not. Really bad. And I don't think I'll be ever called on to be like, no, about it, because I don't think it's going to happen, but I really, really hope it doesn't happen. Really hope it doesn't happen that way.
Literally, people have been saying that since, I don't remember what issue that came up after, but literally, I just thought, the moment I heard that theory, I just thought, that's probably the stupidest thing I've ever heard. But watch it turn out to be the truth, and then I'll have
exactly
shit. But whatever.
Be like, man, I'm forced to eat my words.
Exactly. It's like, watch it be what the actual plot is, but I really don't like it. But yeah, but I like the Watanabe scene quite a bit. And then we got the controversial scene. Oh boy. Peter Puss and Anna Maria. I'm just gonna say it out loud. They fuck on the floor of Peter Puss's factory.
Oh God.
I'm going to say this right now. People get way too up in arms about this whole rape thing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is not the first time this has happened in comics, and I'm not defending it by any means. I'm not defending this by any stretch of the imagination. If this is rape or if it isn't rape, I don't know because I'm not a freaking lawyer, so I don't know what fits the legal definition of rape or not. But it's just like, people need to calm the freak down.
Well, Otto is actually misrepresenting himself as Peter Parker, but I think this would be a little bit more blurred because, to be fair, Otto was in Peter's body when he first met Anna Maria, so he was actually representing Peter the way that Otto had been representing Peter. So it was actually his character, but he wasn't. He's misrepresenting himself as Peter Parker when he's really Otto Octavius. So there'd be a little bit of a blur with this one, whereas it would be, and it would definitely be a little bit more reason to be up in arms if it was Mary Jane. This is a little bit different, so I don't really know if you could call it rape or not.
Really, I think that's a really good point. I mean, Anna Maria only knows Peter Puss. She doesn't know the actual Peter Parker like Mary Jane does. So, with that point established, is it rape? Is it not rape? Honestly,
I'm not really interested in getting into the whole law thing right now.
We're not really
I will say that besides that point, that they did it in his own facility, which is kind of the reason why we tried to impeach Bill Clinton. Just saying.
Yeah. Moving on. Really, the last thing to talk about here is Spock versus Venom. That happens. Really, it just happens. Besides the one badass line at the end, this fight really didn't do much for me. It really didn't.
I don't think it contributed too much to the plot either. It's just kind of there for whatever reason. I just don't know what else to say about it. I just feel that it's kind of there.
The one thing that did actually kind of get me in this fight though was fire and sonic webbing. Are you freaking serious, Dan Slott?
Well, he's far superior to Peter Parker. Peter Parker just, he doesn't have the guts to pull that kind of stuff off.
I don't fucking care. That there's no way he can have a weapon for every single possible situation.
But he's like Batman.
So, yeah, that's really it for this issue. There's just not a lot to say about it.
It's mostly because there's nothing going on. I felt like after I bought it that I wasted about $4 on it. To be quite honest, something that could have been an extra dollar charge on the next issue, I paid $4 for, and so I'm a little taken aback by it. I feel like a lot of this issue was unnecessary to begin with, and I don't really know. There were a few parts I honestly think of the next issue that could have been cut out to make room for this. That would make it just a 3-part story. But I just feel like this feels very drawn out to me to make this an issue, and so I'm just not feeling this one at all.
Yeah, it was an issue I didn't really like when I first read it, and I don't really like it now. So, final grades, Thomas?
I'll just give it a solid C. It's mediocre, but whatever.
I gave it a C- at the beginning. I'm going down to a D. Yeah, this. For the audio listeners, I'm literally chucking the issue out right now. I literally just chucked it across the room. Because that's how little I care about it. All right, so we got Superior 23.
Ooh.
Once again, written by Mr. Slott and Mr. Gage, with, once again, art by Mr. Ramos. I'm just going to say this right now about the cover. I don't like when they put the Superior Spider-Man title at the bottom of the cover.
Nah.
I just, literally, I don't know why that bothers me. It just does. It just does.
Well, I feel like it's ruining the continuity of just having this whole, line of the series. It's all on the top. And now it's just kind of ruining the continuity by moving it down. It's like it feels different than the rest of it.
We're going to get so much hate mail after this show. We're complaining about where the title is on the cover.
Okay, all right. It's not that big of a deal, but...
All right, basic recap of this issue. Venom gets away from Spock, who doesn't end up killing him. Yeah, Spock is all pissed about that. The Goblin King is trying to get answers out of Carly Cooper. for who is under the mask of Spider-Man. He says, you happen to know whose mind is in Spider-Man's noggin, but you don't say who's under the mask. So he's trying to get that piece of information out of her. Meanwhile, Peter Puss and Anna Maria are going to have dinner with Aunt May and Jay Jameson. So they go back to his apartment so Anna Maria can cook up some dinner. Flash goes to Peter Puss's apartment to try and meet with him to do whatever he does. MJ's is now back open, and Watanabe goes to kind of question MJ about Carly's disappearance because MJ is the last person she contacted before her disappearance. Meanwhile, J. Jonah Jameson is contacting Alchemax to build Spider Slayers to defeat Spider-Man, and the dinner between Anna Maria and Aunt May and J. Jameson goes horribly. Peter Puss offers to give Flash legs again, and through that process, they do so, but they also extract the symbiote, and it bonds with Spock to make him the superior Venom. All right. So, initial grades on this issue. Thomas, go ahead.
C plus.
C plus. Same as the last issue's initial grade. I'd give it the same. I'd actually give it a C plus. I'll give it higher than the last issue. I felt that overall this issue entertained me more than the previous issue. I felt that this issue was stronger than the previous one and had a lot more entertaining features to it. I like the concept of Peter Puss not knowing who Flash is, and so him being kind of worried about that. The dinner sequence with Anna Maria and Aunt May and Jay Jameson, that was fairly. I don't really know how to talk about that, really. I didn't really find that to be very in character for Aunt May. Maybe I don't know Aunt May as well as I think I do, but she didn't really seem like the kind of person who would do that. So, take that for what you will. And to me, the most intriguing part of this issue was actually the investigation into Carly Cooper's disappearance, which I thought was actually done quite well. So, Thomas, initial thoughts on this issue before we go through it?
Well, I felt like this one actually had a lot more stuff going on in it, so it made sense for why a lot of this stuff was kept in it, whereas the last one I had a problem with why it even needed to exist. So I think a lot of this really just fed the plot a lot better. So I really don't have much in terms of this part should have been cut out because everything just kind of fed the plot for me. Except for the dinner scene. I felt like I could have done without that.
Yeah, I mean, we'll talk about that when we get there. First off, in this first scene here, we have Spock versus Venom. Once again, it wasn't really that much. It didn't really do that much. It just kind of happened. It was there. It was kind of there. It really wasn't that engaging or that interesting. I felt the dialogue was good. I felt that there was some good banter between them, but ultimately most of the dialogue was inner monologue, so, take that for what you will. I just completely contradicted my own point. Yeah, damn it. Really what got me interested, and I said this before, the Carly Cooper plot, I really think is going in an interesting direction. I really think it is. It's actually the plot I'm more excited for than this whole Venom plot.
Yeah, I feel like the Venom plot will just end in a return to the status quo for everything. I'm not at all interested in any of it, mostly because I didn't even read Agent Venom in the first place. I personally think that Agent Venom will probably be the Venom we see on the big screen, but whatever, that's a story for another time. But I haven't read any of it, personally. So I won't really care about what happens in the end anyway. And all it is going to be, we know again that Superior Spider-Man is still going to be Spock after this, and that stays the same.
Yeah, I mean, I've found it really hard to connect with Flash in these last two issues. I found it really hard to care about his character. Maybe it's the way Slott writes him, or maybe it's just because, I don't really know. It's just I feel like I can't connect with this character, and And it hurts because, Flash is an original Lee Ditko character. He first
Yep.
debuted in Amazing Fantasy 15, and here he is, 50 years later in Superior Spider-Man, and I couldn't give a crap what happens to him.
Exactly. And I feel bad about it too, but honestly, I feel like if I'd read Agent Venom, I would like Flash a lot better than I do here, and I would still not really care here because Dan Slott I feel like he lacks the kind of persona that surrounds Flash and makes Flash who he is, whereas he's mostly focusing on what makes Spock who he is. And that's what I feel like the whole series has been, is just him focusing on what makes Otto a superior Spider-Man to Peter, which seems to be the point he's been trying to prove the entire time. And I just can't agree with it at all.
I kind of disagree on that because personally I think that the basic story of this is supposed to be, Otto is supposed to be initially presented as being superior, but after that we're going to see how all of it is really sort of wrong.
Yeah, I agree that it's building up to the point where we're going to see Otto basically be the maker of his own destruction in the end, but I just feel like as of right now all it's been is why Otto is a better Spider-Man, other than the fact that he kind of screwed up in removing the memories, which is a cool little tidbit here with him forgetting who Flash is.
Yeah, but I was really I was really excited for this arc before it came out, and I just have to say that really these past 2 issues have been disappointing.
Yep.
They really have. I mean, I was excited to see Venom. Obviously, it's not the Eddie Brock Venom that I love, but it's the Venom symbiote. It's one of my favorite villains. I was excited to see that. I was excited to see Flashback again. I was excited to see what they were going to do with all this because they had established that, Slott said on Twitter, I think it was, that Peter Puss was not going to remember who Flash was because he never accessed the Flash Thompson memory. So I was like, ooh, what's this going to bring about? And ultimately, it hasn't done jack shit.
Not much, honestly. I just feel like he's treating him different than Peter would, but how is that different from anyone else? I mean, he treats everyone different than Peter would have.
Yeah.
Every last person that he's met, he's treated different. So it's not really all that different to not have access to Flash memory because it hasn't done anything.
Exactly. I do want to make a comment here on the Ramos art. I didn't mention this in the last review because I honestly felt it was too mean to say, but last issue was the worst issue from Humberto Ramos I've personally ever seen. This is actually a step up. This is not as bad. This is not terrible. I personally felt that the proportions were better in terms of Spock. The coloring was a bit better. Now that doesn't really have anything to do with Ramos, but because that's really the colorist's job. But I felt the coloring was a bit better. And ultimately, I just felt the art in general took a step up in this issue from the last issue.
I agree. Less funky facial expressions, in my opinion, but I just never really am able to enjoy Ramos's art, like really ever, to be quite honest with you. So
I'm not saying I enjoyed it. I just felt that it was a step up from the previous issue. I felt that it did deserve some recognition for being better.
Well, I agree that it was better, but I don't really know how much of a consolation that really is.
The bar was set pretty low, but ultimately I think if you do improve on something, that you should receive recognition for it. So,
yeah.
I have to give Humberto Ramos fair recognition because we are a fair podcast. So I do have to give him fair recognition for his improvement on the art in this issue. The last scene that we really need to talk about, actually there's 2 more scenes actually. I mentioned my thoughts on this very briefly, but J. Jonah Jameson has decided to build Spider Slayers to destroy Spock. After being blackmailed by him for the past 10 issues, I think it is. Yeah, because he started being because Spock started blackmailing him in issue 13, and this is issue 23.
Yeah.
Yeah, see, this is why I passed college algebra. I used that joke before, so yeah. But I personally feel that this is actually going to be a fairly interesting plot. Now, if you read the solicits for Superior Spider-Man 29, I think it was, then you know that this arc is going to have a major part in Goblin Nation. So personally, I think this is an interesting story. I'd like, it goes back to the classic Stan Lee stories because remember, in Amazing Spider-Man number 25, J. Jonah Jameson Spencer Smythe came to him because he wanted to show him his new Spider Slayer, and J. Jonah Jameson with the
took control over it and was the head on it as it went after Spider-Man. Yep.
Yeah. But J. Jonah Jameson was one of the major players in the first Spider Slayer story, and so it's kind of nice that we're kind of harkening back to that here.
Yep.
Go ahead.
Well, I just think that also one of the people that's been acting out of character, actually before Superior number 13, is the fact that J. Jonah Jameson was actually praising Spider-Man for being the very menace that he said he was. For all that time, he said that he was a killer, he was a vigilante, he was doing things that shouldn't be done without police there, and now he starts killing villains, and he's okay with that. He starts taking care of villains in a brutal fashion, and he's okay with that. This is exactly the same stuff that J. Jonah Jameson was saying from issue number 1 of The Amazing Spider-Man that he was going to do. And now that he's doing it, he was perfectly okay. So I'm glad that they're finally getting around to saying, you know what? J. Jonah Jameson is actually not okay with him acting this way and doing illegal things because they're illegal.
Yeah, I have to say, I really was not a fan of J. Jonah Jameson in the early Superior run because, I mentioned this in my written reviews on the site that was just out of character for him because J. Jonah Jameson, at heart, is a good man. He is a good man. He's done some questionable things in the past, but, at his heart, his intentions are fairly pure. Maybe not in the Stan Lee run completely, but, other writers have written him to be, other writers have written him to be a fairly decent guy. He hates Spider-Man because he's jealous of him, because he doesn't like guys in masks. That's kind of, that was established as far back as, I think it was Amazing number 10. He wasn't the best guy in the Stan Lee era, but, he was kind of a good guy.
Yep.
So, really, I think for him to just go all out and praise Spider-Man for doing exactly what he said he was going to do for the past 50 years is completely out of character. And I really don't think Slott understands J. Jonah Jameson for who he is.
J. Jonah Jameson would have been going up and down saying, "I told you so, people. Now look at what he's doing. Look how terrible he is." Instead, he's praising him the whole time.
I really think that Slott misunderstood J. Jonah Jameson here. And it really did kind of bug me that it took Spock blackmailing him to get him to realize the error of his views. But, that's a discussion for another podcast. But really, it's just, I'm glad to see Jonah kind of back to how he should be.
Yep.
It's definitely a better story.
It's refreshing, yeah.
All right, and then the final scene that we need to talk about with this issue is the Peter, Puss, Aunt May, Anna Maria, J. Jameson scene. Personally, I felt the scene was a little out of character for Aunt May.
Yeah. It's just, the kindly old woman kind of plot that we've been playing with since, Amazing Fantasy number 15, it just seems out of place here. Although I think it's been established that she is older, and a lot of older people kind of express views that I feel, and I think this is actually more social commentary than anything else, is kind of a view that they express that isn't correct. The guy from Duck Dynasty got fired or whatever, suspended from his show because he said some anti-gay things.
Well, that's
And
had to make it into this podcast.
I'm sorry, I'm trying, and so I feel like it's sort of like a social commentary kind of thing where old people are kind of saying things that they believe that a lot of the modern day generation is like that is really wrong. So I feel like it might be social commentary, but I don't really feel like it should have made it into Aunt May's mouth.
Yeah, it's just I do agree with you on, and that's a point a lot of people have brought up to me when I've said that I wasn't a fan of this scene. That is a point that a lot of people have brought up, and I do agree with that to an extent. But the thing is, Aunt May's never really been portrayed like that.
No, she hasn't.
So really, for her to just come out and say this was really kind of surprising to me, and really, it's just it doesn't really go along with the kind, sweet old woman that she's been portrayed to be for the past 50 years.
Exactly. I agree. I definitely agree with you more than I agree with the whole it's social commentary. I think it is social commentary, and so to a certain extent, what they're trying to do can be applauded to a certain extent, but I wish they would have done it with someone else. Someone who wasn't portrayed to be this nice old woman that would never even hurt a fly. Is kind of that idea of Aunt May, and if it went against what she is.
Had they done it with Jay Jameson, we would be doing nothing but praising this scene.
I think Aunt May's always been portrayed with a level of acceptance for people, particularly people who are connected to Peter, and particularly people who Peter likes. And it just seems really out of character for her to sort of deliberately come out and insult like someone he actually likes,
Yeah, and the thing that got me was, I mean, I know this is probably what parents do, or quote unquote parents do, but she goes right to talking about children, and I'm like, holy crap, back up.
Whoa, yeah,
slow down.
Yeah, I'm surprised that that's where it went to, because I guess parents do that to freak people out, but it never really struck me as something Aunt May would do either.
I mean, I'm not really complaining about it. I was just thinking, whoa, slow down. Slow down, Aunt May.
That would be my reaction to it. Like, whoa, slow it down, but it just never really seemed like something Aunt May would have done in that situation either. And I've said this before, and I'll say it again. My biggest problem with this whole series is just everyone's acting out of character so that Slott can write the story that he thinks is absolutely necessary for whatever reason. And I believe that he needs to make sure that these characters are the ones driving his story and not the other way around.
That's very true, and that's a very good point that I think a lot of people overlook. There are some very blatant out of character moments, and this Aunt May one was just, this really got to me. That really got to me when I read it. It just, I didn't like it. I really didn't.
I would have really rathered him choose Jay Jameson, honestly.
Jay Jameson, I could see having that kind of prejudice.
He does have that kind of thing, and obviously we know he's older, so he could be that social commentary person and wouldn't have to be Aunt May. In fact, I would have actually preferred it to be Jay, and then Aunt May be like, Jay, and then Peter would, get all on him for like, hey, that's my girlfriend, dude. What the heck is wrong with you?
Yeah. That would have made for a much better scene, in my opinion.
Exactly.
And the final point for this issue, what do we think of Spock becoming the superior Venom?
I feel it's a gimmick.
I mean, this is how I look at it, and I think I said this in my written review of the issue on the site as well. To me, I think it's really cliche and really kind of safe, because it's like, I mean, you could have had so many other people become the superior Venom, but no, you choose Spock. Really? It's like,
yeah, and on top of that, at the end of number 700, he already did kind of say, I'm the superior Spider-Man, and he actually said it out loud. I was like, that had me face palming. at the end of that issue, as with this one, kind of, just that kind of blatant coming out of it, It's just out of place.
We are the superior Venom.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's actually a quote from the book. I'm not just making that up. That's
No, I know. I read it. So
that's an actual quote from the issue. Yeah, I personally think, anyone else but Spock would have been more interesting than this. It really would have. But, yeah, that's really all we have to say about this issue. So, final grade?
I'm going to have to stick with the C+.
I'll stick with C+ as well. It wasn't as bad as the last issue, but it's not great either. All right, and our final topic of the day is Superior 24. Once again, written by Slott and Gage, and art by Mr. Ramos. And the title is actually at the top of the cover this time, so we have nothing to complain about. But all right. So here we go. Flash attempts to get the symbiote off of Spock, as does Cardiac, and the superior Venom just basically whips them away. He goes out and faces Sajani, who says, "What the Hello Kitty is going on in there?" Yeah. We'll talk about that later. But Venom comes out and basically goes on a rampage. He says he contacts his minions at Spider Island and says, "Find me some crime." And then we get a page of the Green Goblin dressing up as the Hobgoblin, because that's totally necessary. And then we get a page establishing the fact that Flash will die if they don't get the symbiote back in him. Then we get a 2-page spread of the superior Venom basically just going around, ripping up the town, with criminals in it, saying stuff like, this city has a protector, a lethal protector. Ask yourself, was that text worth your life? All that bullshit. Anna Maria calls him crying, and he immediately runs to her side. And she says that she basically feels bad about the whole dinner sequence. And Peter Puss says, I'm going to make things right. The Goblin King hits Carly Cooper with the Goblin formula. MJ is going to see Aunt May and Jay Jameson to warn them about Peter. Peter Puss shows up at Aunt May and Jay Jameson's place and basically chews Aunt May out for the dinner sequence from the last issue. MJ intervenes before a fist fight can break out. And, she confronts him on the balcony outside, and he ends up turning into Venom and scaring the shit out of her. Watanabe shows up on the site and demands that MJ come down to the station with her. And then in the last panel, we see MJ calling the Avengers. So, initial grade on this issue. Thomas.
This whole thing has been a rather C+ experience for me, so I'm just going to stick with it.
I have to go lower than my grade on the previous issue. I'm going to give this is going to go in neutral territory for me. I'm going to give it a solid C. I really don't think this issue was anything special, but it had its good moments and it had its bad moments for me.
I think a lot of scenes fell into the unnecessary category.
See, there were a lot of scenes in here that I liked, and there were scenes that I didn't like. Before we go through, let's just go through the issue now. We start off with basically the superior Venom just whacking the shit out of Flash and Cardiac. Nothing really happened there, though I can already tell you that the art is a step above the previous issue, which was a step above the issue before that.
Mm-hmm. The art's progressively getting better, which is definitely a good thing.
The art is getting better, and as I said with the last issue, we are a fair podcast, so we do have to give fair applause to Mr. Ramos for his improvements on the artwork. The art in this issue doesn't actually look that bad. It actually looks fairly decent in my eyes. It's not nearly as good as Cam and Coley's stuff yet, but I do definitely think that it is step above what he was putting out back in issue 22.
Yep.
I do have to say that the first thing I really want to talk about with this issue, what the Hello Kitty? Yeah. That we've gotten some seriously stupid quotes from Superior Spider-Man, like Crazy Town Banana Pants and accessing memory files and all that stuff. This is up there with those.
I'd say it beats them.
I wouldn't say it beats them because maybe you haven't heard this, but I actually heard people say this before. In real life, I'd never heard Crazy Town Banana Pants before. So
I watch Community.
Oh, well, I didn't even know that. So, yeah, I'd never heard Crazy Town Banana Pants. But this to me was absolutely ridiculous. And this isn't even coming from Slott. This is coming from Christos Gage.
I rolled my eyes at the scene, and I actually wanted to put the book down and just stop reading after I read that quote. I couldn't handle it anymore.
It was a very bad line of dialogue, and not something I would expect out of Christos Gage. I mean, I've shared my grievances with Christos Gage in the past. I feel like every time he comes onto the book, the story quality, dips a bit. And again, maybe that's just me being stupid, but it's just something I've noticed.
Mm-hmm.
But I will never say that he writes poor dialogue. He does write fairly good dialogue, and this was just not, this was not an example of that at all.
I just can't see the way that you could view it as good dialogue at all.
It's absolutely atrocious. I mean,
yep.
I don't remember the last time we got a really stupid line in Superior, but this is probably going to be a pretty memorable one. This was terrible.
That was pretty bad. Pretty bad.
And then we had this whole plot of the goblins dressing up again.
Why did you have to show them though? Because I felt like it was already established that they were doing that. So you could have just, gone to like something a little bit more productive than having that scene in there, which I felt like was completely worthless, personally. But
it does kind of help establish a plot, but it's just this whole thing of the goblins dressing up like each other is just stupid.
I don't understand the purpose behind it, although I'm sure that there will be one. I just don't feel like we need reestablishment that that they are doing it, because we already heard about it in a previous issue. That fell out of place in the issue, but I could understand that it was necessary if they were going to further a plot point where it actually made sense. But as of right now, it doesn't.
It was stupid. Like that's literally the only word I can think of to describe it. It just I do kind of understand the plot that they're trying to set up with it, that's established in the next scene with the goblins, but it's just like, you don't need to do this. You really don't. You could just like, if you want the Green Goblin to take stabs at the Hobgoblin, Roderick Kingsley, have him go and just bomb the shit out of his base of operations.
Mm-hmm.
That would do more for me as a reader, and do more. Someone's barking in the background. Yeah. But that would do more for me as a reader, and probably do more for the Goblin character than dressing up like the Hobgoblin.
Yeah.
That bugged the shit out of me. I hated that so much. I've hated that since it was introduced in issue 18.
Yeah.
Moving on, we got a little throwaway scene, kind of, between Flash, Cardiac, and Sajani, I think that is. Yeah, Sajani just happens to throw out the fact that Flash is going to die if they don't get the symbiote back inside him. That's never touched on again in the issue.
Yeah. Maybe it'll be touched on next issue. I feel like this story is trying to really work within the arc, and I feel like they said at the beginning, we're going to make this 4 issues, and we're going to stretch it out so that it's at least 4 issues, so that we can make it to 30 for the end of Goblin Nation.
So that the final part of this issue can be a double-sized 25th issue spectacular, and everyone will want to go buy it for an increased dollar amount.
Exactly.
I mean, this probably will be brought up at in the next issue, but really, it's just the way they delivered the fact here really did not make me care about Flash at all. Again. I mean, that's a big problem I've had with these last 3 issues, and it's a problem again here in this issue. It's like, I just don't care.
I just feel like if he died, that, I don't know if I would care at all, to be quite honest. It's just not there in me caring, other than the fact that I think I would miss just, having a classic character die.
And
one that's been around forever.
I mean, to me, if they do kill Flash in the next issue, personally to me, he's already dead. Because literally, there's nothing hooking me to this character in this arc that's made me even care about him slightly. It's just I
disagree. The biggest thing that has me even caring remotely about him is just the fact that he's a classic character, and it always upsets me when a classic character dies. But other than that, I really don't have a connection to him, so I wouldn't be too upset. I'd just be like, well, there goes another one.
Another one bites the dust.
Exactly.
Love that song. Yeah, we got this 2-page spread of the Superior Venom ripping up the town's criminals, I should say. And yeah, that happens. This is really like the entire premise of this issue is just shit happened.
Yeah.
Shit happened.
Yeah, pretty much.
It wasn't too important, and it was there. It was there.
It was just him doing stuff, and just establishing. Oh, hey, look, he's the Superior Venom.
Yeah.
Look what he can do.
Yeah, it's just honestly, I just kind of want to skip to the end of this issue I think we're gonna do that because the ending scene in this issue is probably one of the best scenes Dan Slott has ever written, in my eyes.
Yeah.
Now, yeah. I'm not saying it's perfect, because there are aspects of it that piss me off. And I've said this on multiple message boards, and I said this in my review on the actual site itself. There are problems with this scene that I think a lot of people are overlooking.
Yeah.
First of all, now I will say that this scene does start out fairly strong. Peter Puss attacking Aunt May like that, not physically, but verbally, him attacking Aunt May like that was pretty in character. And, of course, I did like the reference that Aunt May made to how, Peter Puss doesn't tell her anything. She saw what Spock did to that one guy at the end of Superior Annual number 1, which is actually kind of making that story worthwhile. And, excuse me, and really, I had no problem with that. I actually personally thought that had Mary Jane not interfered and intervened, there would have been a fist fight between Peter Puss and Jay Jameson.
Yep.
There would have been a fist fight, no doubt about it.
Yeah.
And I have to say that, I usually have a big problem with, like, things happening at convenient times. This didn't really have, beg much of a problem with me, because the scene we got after this was even better than the scene between Peter Puss and Aunt May.
Yep.
Finally, we get Mary Jane confronting Peter Puss about his change in behavior, and when he tries to throw her off and tries to make her go away, she says, "Fuck you, I'm getting answers right now."
Yep.
And I was like, finally.
Yeah, Mary Jane, as I've said before, everyone's been acting out of character to accelerate the story and keep it there. So I'm glad that there's finally some sort of, something happening with her in particular, who's been acting, I think, far stupider than any other character in comparison to before. And now she's finally,
standing up for herself, which is way more in character than any of the other scenes with her.
Exactly. I mean, we sort of saw it at the end of number 19. We sort of saw it in number 20, but we're really seeing it here with this plot, and it was just fantastic. And then Peter Puss transforms into the superior Venom, and that's where things do kind of go downhill for me. After he threatens her, and says, if you tell anyone about this, there will be consequences, or whatever he says, she immediately goes back to just making excuses for him. And the problem I had with this was, everyone was saying, oh, well, she did that because she's scared of Venom. Yes, that has been established. That's been a thing ever since Amazing 299 or 300. But my problem with this scene is she literally could have made, if she was going to make excuses, she could have made a better excuse for her screaming than just, oh, Spider-Man came and got Peter. What I personally think, and I've said this on message boards, I've said this on the site, I personally think that she should have said that Spider-Man attacked.
Yeah.
Because to me, that when she said that Spider-Man came and got him, the dignity that she had built up over the past, couple of pages was completely ripped away with that one line.
Yep.
And it was very, very, very disappointing to read. Very.
Yep.
And so we move on from that to the final page of MJ calling the Avengers. It's about damn time someone called the Avengers, but really, this should have been done so long ago.
It really should have. Carly Cooper not calling the Avengers before when she actually figured out who Spock was, that got to me. I don't really think that was a very good plot point, but whatever. Some people disagree with me, but it should have been so long ago, and it should have been, Carly Cooper should have contacted the Avengers in the first place. Ever since Otto Octavius told me that, hey, I'm actually Peter, Spider-Man has been acting awfully weird. You really should check into the fact that he might actually be Otto Octavius, like, for real, instead of just doing the half-assed little thing that you did without anyone actually there to actually say, hey, you should have done this, this, and this. You really need to make sure, but nobody ever did that. Of course not, because you need to keep the story going for as long as possible. But I'm so glad finally someone decided to contact the Avengers about Peter's awful change in personality completely.
And the thing that really does, I mean, this is my con of, this is my one big thing that I think is going to screw this story over. When MJ contacts the Avengers, she says that he's been taken over by the Venom symbiote. So, really, I feel like what Slott is trying to get at here is that MJ and Captain and the Avengers are going to sort of assume that Spock has been under the control of the symbiote this entire time, which completely goes against everything they've established, because when the Avengers checked him out in issue number 8, he had no symbiote. So if Slott does go there, then it's going to be a major, major plot problem.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's just, I have a feeling that's where they're going with the story, and it's not making me happy.
I really hope that they don't do that, because they did check him out, and that would have been immediately obvious in issue number 8.
All right, so I think we've spent enough time on these 3 issues. We spent over an hour at this point on these 3 issues. So Thomas, final grade on Superior 24.
I'll give it a indifferent score of C.
I'll give a C also. It's not terrible. It's not great. It's neutral. All right, so that is going to do it for this week's episodes of the SpiderNerd podcast. Again, thanks to everyone who tuned in to both shows this week. Again, like I said, we split it up because we didn't want to have a 2-hour-long podcast, because I think those are tedious and unnecessary. So with that, thanks to everyone who has tuned in this week. Come back next week. I'll probably release it around Tuesday. Come back next week for our 2013 wrap-up show.
Mm-hmm.
We think that'll be fun, and hopefully we'll have more than 2 of us here.
Yay.
Hopefully, it depends. It depends.
Okay.
Again, I said this in the last episode, and I'll say it again here. If anyone is interested in joining the panel, you have you're able to be here on a fairly consistent basis. You love Spider-Man, you love the comics, you're enthusiastic about it, you want to talk about it, send me an email, johndougweber@gmail.com, all lowercase. So, yeah. Oh, and Jon, not John. Jon.
Mm-hmm.
Just to clear that up, I just realized that could provide a problem. So Jon. The address is on the webmaster page on the site, so if you need it, you can go there. All right, so with that, we are going to sign off for the week. So we will see you guys next week. So see you later.
Bye.